January 12, 1945. A clearing in the Ardennes forest, near Bastogne, Belgium. The air is a frozen razor, smelling of churned mud, pine sap, and the lingering metallic tang of cordite. Winter has not released its grip, it has only tightened it. The trees, skeletal and black, stand as silent witnesses to the fury that recently tore this landscape apart. Now, in the aftermath of the Great German Offensive, a different kind of war is being waged, a war of logistics, of processing, of counting the human cost. This is Transit Camp No. 7, a hastily erected city of mud-caked canvas and barbed wire. For Corporal Elias Vance of the 121st Evacuation Hospital's Medical Detachment, the view is a monotonous sea of gray. Gray sky, gray uniforms, gray faces drained of color and hope. He stands at the entrance of a large medical tent, the canvas flapping in the biting wind like a tired lung. A column of German prisoners shuffles past, their boots making a thick, sucking sound in the muck. They are the leftovers of the Wehrmacht and the Waffen-SS, boys and old men swept up in the final, desperate gamble. Vance, a 22-year-old from the flat plains of Ohio, feels a familiar ache in his bones. It's a weariness that goes deeper than muscle. He's been on his feet for 16 hours, triaging everything from trench foot to shrapnel wounds. His job is to sort the walking wounded from the seriously injured, the sick from the mailing hearse. It's a production line of human misery. You check their teeth, their breathing, listen for the telltale rattle of pneumonia, and mark their papers with a grease pencil. Red for immediate evacuation, yellow for observation, black for the morgue. And green. Green for fit enough to be shipped to a permanent POW camp. Most get a green. He pulls his collar tighter, watching the next group being herded toward him by a pair of bored-looking GIs from the 28th Infantry Division. Their M1 Garans are slung casually, their faces chapped and raw from the cold. The prisoners move with a collective, defeated shuffle. Their eyes are hollow, fixed on the ground a few feet in front of them. You learn not to look into them for too long. You see too much, or worse, nothing at all. But one figure in the line catches his eye. A woman. It's not unheard of, they processed a handful of Helferinnen, female auxiliaries who worked as radio operators, clerks, or anti-aircraft gunners. But this one is different. She isn't crying or defiant. She isn't looking away in shame. She stands with a stillness that is almost unnerving, her back ramrod straight, her gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the wire, beyond the broken forest. She is thin, her gray wool uniform hanging loosely on her frame, but she carries herself with a strange, rigid grace. Her blonde hair is pulled back in a severe, tight knot. Her face is pale and angular, a mask of serene indifference. Next group. Let's go, move it, a sergeant barks, his voice hoarse. The line inches forward. Vance takes a sip from his canteen. The water is metallic and so cold it makes his teeth ache. He glances down at his clipboard. The ink is starting to run in the damp air. He pulls another prisoner forward, a boy who can't be more than 16, and begins the road process. Open your mouth. Breathe deep. Any pain? The boy just stares, shivering. Vance marks his card. Green. The woman is getting closer. He can see her more clearly now. She is perhaps in her late 20s. There are no visible wounds, no limp. She moves with the same stiff precision as a clockwork doll. While the men around her slump with exhaustion, she remains erect, as if held up by an invisible frame. It's an act of will, he thinks. A final, silent protest against the indignity of it all. Finally, she is at the front of the line. The GI behind her gives her a gentle nudge with the butt of his rifle. Your turn, Fräulein. She steps forward and stops 2 feet in front of Vance's makeshift examination station, an overturned ammunition crate. She does not look at him. She continues to stare at that point over his shoulder, her blue eyes as flat and cold as a winter sky. Vance clears his throat, his breath turning to white smoke. "Name," he says, his voice more tired than he intends. "Anneliese Schmidt," she replies. Her voice is low, steady, with no discernible accent beyond its German origin. There is no fear in it, no anger. It is utterly devoid of emotion. He finds her name on his list. Nachrichtenhelferin. Signals auxiliary. "Okay, Schmidt. Standard check. I need you to sit on the stool." He gestures with his head toward a simple wooden stool next to the crate. It's a small, mundane request he has made 100 times today. It is the beginning of the ritual, the first step in a process designed to be quick, efficient, and impersonal. But her response is not what he expects. She doesn't move. Her eyes flicker for a fraction of a second, the only sign of life he has seen in them yet. She looks at the stool, then back at the empty space above his head. And then, she speaks the words that will shatter the routine of his day, and haunt the rest of his war. "I cannot." The two words hang in the frigid air, simple and absolute. Not, "I will not," which would have been defiance. Not, "I would rather not," which would have been a plea. But "I cannot." A statement of fact. Corporal Vance blinks, the rhythm of his work broken. He looks from her impassive face to the simple wooden stool. "It's just a stool. It will only be for a moment," he says, his tone softening slightly. He assumes it's a matter of pride. Some of them are like that. The officers, the true believers. They resist in small ways, refusing to comply with minor orders to maintain some shred of dignity. It is part of the procedure. Everyone sits. Anneliese Schmidt does not move. Her posture remains impossibly straight. "I understand the procedure," she says, her voice as calm and even as before. "But I cannot sit down." A flicker of irritation crosses Vance's exhausted mind. He doesn't have time for this. There are still 50 more prisoners to process before his shift ends, and the cold is seeping deeper into his bones. The GI standing guard behind her shifts his weight, the leather of his gear creaking. "Problem, Doc?" he asks, his voice low. "No, it's fine," Vance says, waving him off. He turns his attention back to the woman. He has to get this done. He tries a different approach, the one they taught in training for dealing with uncooperative prisoners. Firm, but not aggressive. "Look, Fräulein, I need to listen to your breathing, check your vitals. It is for your own health. Now please, sit on the stool." She meets his gaze for the first time. Her eyes are not defiant, but empty. It's a profound, cavernous emptiness that unnerves him more than any open hostility could. There is a deep, ancient weariness in them. "I will stand," she says quietly. "You may conduct your examination. But I will not sit." Something in her tone stops him. The finality of it. This is not a game. This is not a test of wills. He feels a prickle of unease on the back of his neck. He has seen shell-shocked soldiers, men whose minds had been shattered by the horrors of combat. They had that same look, a disconnect from the world around them. But her voice is perfectly lucid. "Why?" he asks, the question slipping out before he can stop it. "It's a breach of protocol. You don't ask why. You give orders. You process them. You move on." For a long moment, she is silent. The wind whips a loose strand of her blonde hair across her cheek. She does not brush it away. "It is not possible for me," she finally says, her voice barely a whisper. Vance lets out a slow breath, his mind racing. Is it a physical injury? He scans her body again. No limp. No visible splint or bandage. She stands perfectly balanced. He's a medic, not an interrogator, but his diagnostic instincts are kicking in. There is a piece of this puzzle he is missing. He has to know. The health and disposition of every prisoner is his responsibility. If she has an injury that prevents her from sitting, it must be documented. It could be a spinal fracture, a severe pelvic injury. Something that needs a red tag, not a green one. "Are you injured?" he asks, his voice now purely professional. "You must tell me if you are injured. That's my job. To help." A ghost of a smile, so faint it's almost imaginary, touches her lips. It is a smile of pure, heartbreaking irony. "Help," she repeats, the word sounding foreign on her tongue. Then, the smile vanishes. There is no injury from the battle. The clarification only deepens the mystery. No injury from the battle. He feels a growing dread, a sense that he is standing on the edge of a dark, hidden place. The routine medical check has become something else entirely. He looks at her papers again. Captured 2 days ago near WWII. Her unit was overrun. The report is brief, clinical. Nothing unusual. He makes a decision. "All right," he says, his voice quiet. "Stay standing. Turn around. Face the tent." She hesitates for a second, then complies with the same rigid obedience. She turns her back to him, facing the grubby canvas wall of the medical tent. She is now just a silhouette against the gray light. Vance picks up his stethoscope, its metal disc cold in his hand. He steps forward. "I need to listen to your lungs. I'm going to have to unbutton the back of your tunic." She gives a single, sharp nod. Her hands remain clasped behind her back. His fingers, clumsy with cold, fumble with the coarse buttons of her field gray uniform. The wool is damp and smells of wet earth and sweat. He undoes the top 3 buttons, enough to slip the stethoscope underneath. He pulls the fabric aside, exposing the thin cotton shift she wears beneath. He presses the cold metal against the skin of her upper back. "Take a deep breath," he instructs. She inhales. The sound in his ears is clear. No fluid. No wheezing. He moves the stethoscope down. And again. She breathes. Lungs are fine. He is about to button her tunic back up, to mark her card with a green and move on, to let the mystery go. But his medical training, the part of him that is trained to observe, to look for the things that are hidden, won't let him. The way she stands. The unwavering declaration, "I cannot sit down." It doesn't add up. "I need to check your spine," he says, the words feeling heavy in his own mouth. It's a lie, a pretext. He needs to see. "I need you to lower your tunic to your waist." He feels her entire body go tense, a sudden, sharp rigidity that travels through her like an electric shock. For a moment, he thinks she will refuse. That she will turn and face him with that same empty gaze. But instead, she slowly, deliberately, reaches back and pushes the heavy wool fabric down, letting it fall and bunch around her waist. And in the cold, unforgiving light of a Belgian winter afternoon, Corporal Elias Vance sees why she cannot sit down. At first, his mind doesn't process it. His medic's eye sees only skin. Pale, stretched taut over a thin frame. The knobs of her spine are prominent, a testament to weeks, perhaps months, of inadequate food. Below her shoulder blades, the skin is crisscrossed with a faint network of faded white lines. Old scars. Nothing a soldier, even a female auxiliary on the Eastern Front, might not acquire. A fall from a truck, a piece of shrapnel from a near miss, the brutalities of a war zone. He has seen worse, far worse, on the bodies of men dragged from the front lines. But then, his gaze travels lower. As he looks down her back, toward her waist and below, the landscape of her skin changes. The faint, silvery lines give way to something else entirely. Something visceral and horrifying. The skin is no longer smooth. It is a ruined, brutalized terrain. A tapestry of violence woven into flesh. It is a mass of raised, keloid scars. Thick, ropey, and discolored, they form a hideous latticework. They are not the clean lines of a surgical incision or the jagged tear of shrapnel. These are different. They are parallel, deliberate. Long, deep furrows that have healed into permanent ridges of tissue, some as thick as his little finger. They crisscross each other in a sickening pattern of overlapping violence, a history written in a language of pure agony. The color is a mottled geography of pink, deep red, and a waxy, translucent white where the skin was destroyed completely. Vance feels the air leave his own lungs. The stethoscope dangles from his neck, forgotten. He takes an involuntary step back. His clinical detachment, the professional wall he has built around himself to survive this war, crumbles into dust. This is not a battle wound. This is not an accident. This is torture. He can see the instrument that made them in his mind's eye. A whip. A rod. Something heavy and unyielding, brought down again and again and again with systematic, soul-destroying cruelty. He sees the timing of it. Some scars are older, faded to a pale sheen. Others are newer, still angry and red, puckered and raw at the edges, barely healed. This was not a single event. This was a campaign of torment, waged over time, on the canvas of this woman's body. The world outside the tent seems to recede. The sound of the wind, the muffled shouts of the guards, the shuffling of the prisoners in the line, it all fades into a dull, distant roar. In this small, cold space, there is only him, this woman, and the silent, screaming testimony on her back. He feels a wave of nausea rise in his throat. His hands, which have stitched wounds and set bones with steady precision, begin to tremble. Who does this to a person? The question hammers at his thoughts. Who takes a human being and systematically destroys them like this? His mind presents a gallery of monsters. The Gestapo? The SS? But her papers said her unit was overrun. On the Eastern Front. A cold, black understanding begins to dawn on him. He has heard stories, rumors whispered by veteran soldiers in hushed, grim tones. Stories about the fighting in the East. A war without rules, without mercy. A war of annihilation, where capture was often a sentence to horrors worse than a quick death. He forces himself to look closer, his medical training fighting its way back through the shock. He has to assess the damage. He can see that the deeper scars, the ones concentrated on her lower back and the tops of her buttocks, have fused together in places, creating a solid mass of hardened, inflexible scar tissue. The skin has lost all its elasticity. It's a permanent armor of pain. Now he understands. To sit would be to put pressure on that ruined flesh, to stretch that unyielding, nerve-damaged tissue. It would be an agony beyond imagining. She doesn't sit because she physically cannot. The simple act of resting, of taking the weight off her feet, has been stolen from her forever. He reaches out a hand, his fingers shaking, and gently, so gently, he touches one of the thick, raised ridges of scar tissue. It is cool and hard, like leather. It doesn't feel like human skin. At his touch, he feels a violent, uncontrollable shudder rack her entire body. A sound escapes her lips, a tiny, choked gasp, the first crack in her armor of silent composure. But she does not pull away. She remains standing, rigid, her back to him, exposed. Vance pulls his hand back as if he's been burned. The touch has made it real. It is not just something he is seeing, it is something he has felt. The reality of her suffering floods him, a cold tide of helpless rage and profound, soul-deep pity. He looks at this woman, this anonymous German prisoner, and he no longer sees the enemy. He sees a human being who has been to the deepest, darkest cellar of human cruelty and has somehow, impossibly, survived to stand here before him. He opens his mouth to speak, but no words come. What can he say? What question can possibly be asked that isn't a grotesque understatement? He finally manages a single, whispered word, a question he already knows has no simple answer, and one he is terrified to hear. Who? Anneliese Schmidt does not answer his whispered question. She doesn't need to. Her silence is more eloquent than any words could be. It fills the space between them, thick with unspeakable history. For a long moment, she remains perfectly still, her back exposed to the cold air and his horrified gaze. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, she reaches back and pulls the rough wool tunic up, covering the terrible map of her suffering. The fabric settles over the scars, hiding them from view once more. The secret is buried again, but for Corporal Vance, it can never be unseen. She turns to face him. The mask is back in place. The same pale, impassive face, the same distant, empty eyes. But now he sees it differently. It is not emptiness. It is a fortress. It is the last line of defense for a mind that has endured the unimaginable. Her calm is not a sign of indifference, it is a monumental act of will, a constant, exhausting battle to hold the shattered pieces of herself together. Vance fumbles for the jar of antiseptic salve on his crate. His hands are still shaking. He has to do something. He is a medic. His purpose is to heal, to mend, to alleviate pain. But what can he do for this? How do you treat a wound that is carved into a person's soul? He opens the jar, the sharp, clean smell of phenol a stark contrast to the foulness of the discovery. There are some areas that are not fully healed, he stammers, his voice thick. They could get infected in these conditions. I need to apply some of this. She gives a small, almost imperceptible nod. He gestures for her to turn around again. She obeys without a word. He takes a clean gauze pad and scoops up a generous amount of the thick, white ointment. He gently lifts the hem of her tunic. This time, he avoids looking at the whole picture. He focuses on a single task, a single patch of angry, red skin where a newer wound has not yet fully closed. You focus on the one thing you can fix. You have to. It's the only way to keep from drowning. As he dabs the cool salve onto her skin, he feels her flinch, a tiny, involuntary tremor. He works as quickly and gently as he can, his breath held tight in his chest. He is acutely aware of the intimacy of the moment, the profound trust she is placing in him. He is an enemy soldier, a man. And yet, she is allowing him to touch her wounds. He thinks of his sister back home in Ohio, her easy laughter, her life untouched by this kind of darkness. He thinks of the simple, clear lines he had drawn in his own mind when he enlisted. Us versus them. Good versus evil. The ones who bomb cities and the ones who liberate them. But here, in this cold, muddy tent, those lines have dissolved into a bloody, incomprehensible gray. The woman in front of him wore the uniform of the enemy. She was a part of the machine that had caused so much death and destruction. And yet, she was also a victim of a brutality so profound it defied ideology. He finishes applying the salve and carefully lowers her tunic. He takes a clean field dressing from his kit and secures it with medical tape. A small, wholly inadequate gesture against a universe of pain. I will mark your file for daily wound dressing, he says, his voice barely audible. You will be brought here each morning. She turns back to him. Her face is unchanged. But as he looks into her eyes now, he sees something flicker in their depths. A glint of acknowledgement. A silent recognition that he has seen past the uniform, past the prisoner number, and has witnessed the truth of her. He picks up his grease pencil to mark her card. His hand hovers over the boxes. Red tag? No, her life isn't in immediate danger. Yellow. Observation. That's the one. But it feels so insufficient. He presses the pencil to the paper, but his hand is shaking so badly he can't form the letter. A sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion crashes over him. It is a toxic cocktail of fury at her unseen tormentors, of crushing helplessness at his inability to do anything meaningful, and of a deep, sorrowful empathy that transcends nationality and uniform. A hot tear escapes his eye and drips onto the medical card, smearing the ink. He quickly brushes it away, mortified. Another follows. He turns his head away, trying to hide his face from the line of prisoners outside, from the GI guard. But he can't stop them. The dam has broken. The horrors he has seen over the last year, the mangled bodies, the dying friends, the sheer, relentless waste of it all have coalesced around this one silent woman and her terrible secret. He is not just crying for her. He is crying for everything. He squeezes his eyes shut, his shoulders shaking with a silent sob. When he opens them, she is still standing there, watching him. Her expression has not changed. But her gaze is no longer fixed on a point over his shoulder. She is looking directly at him. And in that moment, in the middle of a muddy field in a war-torn country, two enemies share a brief, profound, and devastating moment of shared humanity. He, the witness. She, the survivor. Both prisoners of the same terrible war. The moment stretches, suspended in the cold air, then it breaks. The GI guard at the tent flap, sensing the delay, pokes his head inside. "Everything all right in here, Corporal?" Vance quickly wipes his face with the back of his sleeve, his cheeks hot with shame despite the freezing temperature. "Yeah. Just finished," he says, his voice rough. He grabs the grease pencil and with a final, determined effort, marks Anneliese Schmidt's card with a bold yellow stripe and adds a note, "Daily wound care required. Severe tissue damage." It's clinical, detached language. A pathetic attempt to reduce the horror to a manageable, bureaucratic entry. He hands the card back to her. Their fingers don't touch. "Give this to the sergeant," he instructs, his voice low. "They'll know what to do." She takes the card, gives him one last, unreadable look, and then turns. She walks out of the tent with that same impossibly erect posture, rejoining the world of gray anonymity. Vance watches her go, a small, straight-backed figure swallowed by the crowd of defeated men. He stands there for a long time, the antiseptic smell of the tent filling his lungs, the image of her back burned onto the inside of his eyelids. He forces himself to move. "Next," he calls out, his voice cracking. The rest of the day is a blur. He goes through the motions, checking mouths, listening to lungs, palpating abdomens. But he is no longer just processing prisoners. With every man who steps before him, he feels a gnawing curiosity, a terrible new awareness. What stories are they hiding? What silent agonies are concealed beneath their threadbare uniforms? The boy with the nervous tic, the old man with the 1,000-yard stare, the swaggering NCO whose bravado seems too brittle. They are no longer a faceless enemy. They are a collection of unknowns, of potential horrors. Anneliese Schmidt has infected him with her story, and now he sees its shadow everywhere. That evening, long after the last prisoner has been processed, Vance sits alone in the mess tent, pushing cold stew around his metal tray. The familiar, boisterous sounds of the campmen playing cards, laughing at a crude joke, the crackle of the radio seem distant and muted. He can't shake the feeling of the hard, leathery scar tissue under his fingertips. He can't forget the look in her eyes when she finally saw him. He finds the mess sergeant, a burly man named O'Malley. "Sergeant," he begins, "that group of prisoners from the 101st Sector today, the ones being held in Provisional Stockade C. Can we get an extra blanket issue for them? And maybe some of the leftover bread?" O'Malley raises an eyebrow. "Feeling charitable, Vance? They're Krauts. They get standard rations. You know the rules." "I know," Vance says, his gaze steady. "But it's freezing out there. One of them is in bad shape. It's a medical necessity. The sergeant studies him for a moment, then shrugs. Fine. I'll see what I can do. But don't make a habit of it. It is a small, pitifully inadequate gesture, but it's something. An act of defiance against the overwhelming cruelty of the world. Later, as he tries to sleep on his cot, the canvas walls of his tent doing little to keep out the biting wind, his mind replays the scene over and over. He sees the scars not just as wounds, but as a text. A chronicle of survival. He wonders about her life before the war, about the person she was before she was remade by pain. He wonders if she will ever truly be free, even if she survives the war, survives the POW camp. How do you come back from that? How do you ever learn to sit down again, in a world that feels safe? The war will end. He knows it will. He will go home to Ohio, to a life of peace and quiet, of neatly mown lawns and Sunday dinners. He will try to forget the mud, the blood, and the cold. But he knows, with a certainty that chills him to his core, that he will never forget Anneliese Schmidt. He will forever carry the memory of her scars. They have become a part of him, too. A reminder that the true cost of war is not measured in battle statistics or captured territory, but in the private, hidden agonies of individuals, in the wounds that never make it into the history books. Outside, the freezing rain begins to fall again, tapping against the canvas like 1,000 tiny, insistent fingers. Corporal Elias Vance lies awake in the darkness, staring at the canvas roof of his tent, a young medic from Ohio who has just learned the devastating truth that some scars can never be healed, and that the deepest wounds of war are the ones that are never seen at all.